perfection. Therefore, you should do your work with a view to the maintenance of the world. With the word loka samgraha, which you see the first word in the third line, Shri Krishna has started a new topic. The maintenance of the world. Loka samgraha, the maintenance of the world. This is a very big concept among Indian rishis. We therefore think about it in detail. But first of all, Shri Krishna shows that Janaka, who was Sita's father in the Ramayana, and others attain perfection. Rather than think about principles, it's important to apply them in our lives, and one needs to see that someone has done this in his life or her life. Seeing this real life example of how a person has successfully achieved perfection gives a lot of inspiration to the ordinary person. That is why Shri Krishna has shown the example of Janaka. He's trying to say that what is possible for Janaka and what is indeed possible for one person is therefore possible for everyone. For example, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon and came back. Logically, if one person has set their foot on the moon and comes back, that means that you and I can also do it. This is because what is possible for one person is also possible for others as well. And Shri Krishna says Janaka and others, meaning not only Janaka, but many such kings have already reached this state. Janaka's non-attachment is very famous. Mithilayam pragatayam namati daya keshana, which was his state of mind. A sannyasi, a person who had given up the world, renounced the world, came to Janaka's palace. Janaka was known as Vidayi Dayag. He was a king of a vast kingdom, and he was Yagnavalkya's pupil. He was managing his kingdom, and the sannyasi was thinking that I've left everything, and yet I have not attained the ultimate bliss. On the other hand, Janaka is a king of a vast kingdom, lives amongst many luxuries, and enjoys so many material pleasures, yet he has still attained the supreme knowledge. How can this be? The sannyasi therefore went to meet Janaka and asked him, I have left the material world, I've gone to the jungle to live in a hut made of grass, and yet I have still not attained the supreme knowledge. I have heard a lot about your fame. Living amongst so many pleasures and luxuries, how do you keep yourself steady? Janaka replied that he'll show him tomorrow, and at the moment it's night, so he should eat and go to sleep. The sannyasi was given very nice food, because what could be missing from a king's palace? He was then shown a room where he could sleep. It was a very big room with all the luxuries, and they've been described in detail in our scriptures. The beds were very soft and comfortable, and there were chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. It was the ultimate luxury. The sannyasi could not sleep for half the night. When a person's been regularly sleeping on grass, and when you suddenly give them an extremely comfortable bed, like a student suddenly becomes rich and goes to work, then going to sleep will be a little difficult. He kept looking at all the luxuries in the room, and when he got tired, he fell asleep. He woke up in the morning, and Janaka told him that they would go to the jungle and talk. They went and left the town. Janaka was walking at a quick pace, whereas the sannyasi was walking slowly, and he kept looking back at the palace. He continually had this wish in his mind that he could sleep in the palace again, and he could eat that same dinner that he had the night before. After 10 or 15 steps, he kept on looking back. They walked 1 or 2 steps, and slowly they could hardly see the town anymore. They went about 3 or 4 miles away from the town, and when the sannyasi looked back, the town was very small in a view that he could see. Suddenly, it looked as if a fire was breaking out in the entire town. The sannyasi got completely shocked and told Janaka that a fire had broken out in the town. Janaka told him to forget about it because they were here to discuss wisdom. He said, Pasi patayam mitilayam name daheti kashama, meaning, if the town is burning, then let it burn. I am outside of it, and nothing is burning where we are. He was this non-attached. When he was in the kingdom, he would run it because it was his responsibility given to him by God to do so. But when there was a fire, then he would just let it go. If one has a torn £50 note and a new £50 note in their pocket, then both of these notes lead to attachment to him. Both of them have the same value. If he goes to a shop and pays using them, they both have the same value to him. The value and convertibility is the same. Yet a person still has this attachment because he has to give this £50 note to someone. Then he looks at them both and he slowly gives that person the torn £50 note. and keeps the new £50 note for himself. The new note is going to stay with him throughout his life. If he does not pay with it today, then he will pay with it tomorrow. And there's such a small thing, and a person creates an attachment towards it because he cannot live without it. Yet the king of such a vast kingdom at Mithila was unaffected when the whole kingdom burned down. Prapisayam Mithilayam Name Dahiti Gashana. This must be a very difficult state, that you're totally non-attached when the thing is not there. He does not neglect that thing, so please don't misunderstand this. When he has the thing, then he fulfills his responsibility for it, and then when he does not have the thing, then he is completely unaffected by it. This is because he knows that at the root he is the soul, and all these things are objects that come into contact with the soul, but he is not them. The reason why we get attachment is that when something comes, then we identify ourselves with it and give a part of this I to them. We feel that it is our extension. When a new piece of clothing comes near us, then immediately we give it the token of ourselves or the I. Therefore, you become the clothing, and when something happens to the clothing, then you get disheartened. Why? Because I feel that the clothing is part of me. People that are non-attached know that it is not them. They are not the clothing, they are not any of these objects. You are a pure soul. You cannot understand this with words, but with experiences. Only then can you see that you are not the objects close to you. You are not the people near to you. You are a pure soul, and that is your true self. Everything else comes and goes. Only when one attains this state does a person become non-attached. When you attain this state, then does that mean that there's nothing left for you to do? Because the soul has no need to act. Shri Krishna, in the next verse, gives a reason why, even after attaining this state, one can't stop acting. But first, we have to understand this concept of Loka Samgraha. Just like the other concepts in the Gita, such as Sthita Prajna and Swadharma, this is a unique concept among Indian rishis. We first have to understand the meaning of Loka Samgraha. Loka means people, Sam means in the right way, and Graha means to gather together. Loka means people or two people, Sam means in the right way, and Graha means to gather together. Loka Samgraha is these three words put together, and it means to gather people together in the right way. Therefore, two things are necessary in Loka Samgraha. First, people's welfare, and through that, the wish to make a society, a country, or a world better. The world you have come into is God's, because God is its creator. I have love for God, and therefore, it is my duty to make this world a beautiful place. Once a person feels this way, then he begins practicing Loka Samgrahan. If you like a certain artist and you have a painting, then the artist will look after that painting very well. You will not let it get ruined. In the same way, the world is God's creation, and you have a relation and a lot of love for God. Therefore, it is your duty to make this world a wonderful, beautiful place. How can you make this world a beautiful place? A unit of the world is a human being. Therefore, I'll make this human being a better person. Once human beings become better people, then the world will become a better place. In the Udyog Parya of the Mahabharata, it is said, Rishayo apir nimuktaha pashyamo loka samgraha, meaning rishis became liberated after thinking about Loka Samgraha. In the Athurved, when a brahmachari, a celibate, because the first 25 years of one's life was a celibate student, completes his studies by staying at a rishi's hermitage and is about to depart, then the Guru gives him a message. It is clearly said that brahmachari ye samsada samadhi tarakarshanam vasano dikshito dika ma shrutu satata eti parvasam samadam lokam sangruva murachiri krata. So after this student with a long moustache and a beard, as students look like when they completed their studies, then they should travel across India as it was then, gathering people and spreading thoughts of dharma. This is a mission we gave to our sannyasis. Therefore, Loka Samgraha is every human being's divine duty. The more successful and the greater the human being becomes, then the more that his responsibility of loka samgraha increases. Many people have done a PhD only on the loka samgraha part of the Gita. It's a really unique concept. Experience has taught Guruji that every moment in life is an opportunity to make the world a better place. It is in our own interest to do good to other people. If you do not do good to other people and just do good to yourself, then your own good will not be achieved in a long term. It is impossible. If you keep sucking society dry and gathering things yourself, and society becomes empty because of it, then you cannot remain wealthy for long. Uma Shankar has written a very nice piece saying, Bhukya janano jatara ni jagse khande reni pasma kari na lajse. Hungry people's stomachs will wake them up, and they will reduce to ashes the wealth of people that took from them. Hungry people's stomachs will wake up, and they will reduce to ashes the wealth of the people that took from them. The history of the world proves this statement to be true. Whichever kings, landlords, or other people gathered things by sucking society dry, then in the end, society has had a revolution and stolen it away from them. In the US, there is an unemployment allowance, and this started at the time of the Industrial Revolution. This is because before this period, every person had a job. For example, if there was a mill to make cloth, then everything was made by hand, and therefore 2,000 people worked at that mill. When the Industrial Revolution came, then the machines arrived, and owners would naturally want to increase the productivity, efficiency, and quality. Therefore, the owners bought machines. The machines produced the work very quickly. The job that used to be done by 2,000 people was now done by machines. Say, if you needed only 50 people to operate that machine, then 1,500 workers are surplus to requirements. If in this one particular mill, 1,500 workers became redundant. In another factory as well, 1,500 workers became redundant. And then in several other factories, 1,500 or so people became redundant. So many people now became unemployed. The owners just wanted to improve their productivity. So many people now became unemployed. The efficiency and the profitability increased. The machines did better work than the 15,000 extra workers, and everything went right for the owners. But what about the 15,000 people that became redundant in each and every factory? What did they do? This started happening in every field. Then the government became scared and asked the owners to give a greater share of the profits to the government in the form of tax. The government, they gave this money to unemployed people so it could fill their stomachs. The government made payments to them every 2 weeks. People see the government doing a really nice thing, but in fact it's the selfish interest of the government. This is because if the number of hungry, unemployed people increased in society, then they would become criminals. Criminals will only go to steal things from people that have those things. They would therefore attack those factory owners. They would set fire to those factories. It was to protect these factory owners and to make sure that these factories were not set on fire that the government gave these people a share of the revenues collected from taxes. This was the unemployment allowance. So the root of this was self-interest. You should live life for the good of other people. Selfishness can never last. People have to look after other people. A person that performs work as a sacrifice removes any selfish element inside him or her. After the selfish element is gone, then there is no need to do anything for oneself. Such a person does not need anything and therefore has no reason to do anything for himself. Yet it is a rule in the world that one cannot go without acting. Ekashit samarpi jagati tasyu karma krut, as we have seen already earlier in this chapter, what Sri Krishna says. A person that reaches this state has a confusion. He does not want to do anything for himself, and he cannot go without acting. Shariryate pijaye napasiddhya karma. Then what should one perform actions for? At that time, Sri Krishna says that one should perform works for loka samgraha, for the maintenance of the world. loka sangram ayavapi samsyam kartum arhasi. Therefore, if you cannot perform actions in your selfish interests, then perform actions for society and therefore loka samgraha. Loka sangraha is the nature of good people. When the factory is running, the owner becomes tired and wonders who he's doing all this work for. There are 5,000 people working in the factory, there is no one near him, and he thinks that he's doing all this sweating and toiling because he has to satisfy his living expenses. He decides one day that he wants to close this factory. He decides this, that if he closes this, then what will happen to the other 5,000 people working in the factory? The government will immediately come in the middle and tell him that he cannot close the factory. The person may say there is no interest in the factory because he has enough now and he doesn't want to be running all the time. The government will tell him that it's not a question just for himself, but it's a question of the other 5,000 people working there. It is a question of employment. If all the 5,000 people have 5 people in their families, including them, then it's a question of 5,000 times 5, which is 25,000 people. If the owner still says that he does not want to want the factory, then nationalization will take place. The government will take it over. The owner will not need to worry anymore because this factory will keep running but under government control. This will not make a difference to factory workers because they will still get paid in the same way that they were getting paid before. Now that the government board comes and sits there, the government will carry on running the factory. The reason for this is that the factory does not exist for the self-interest of one person, but 5,000 workers' livelihoods depend on it. In the same way, as a human being develops to reach birth and then finally attains a state of non-attachment, his efficiency, wisdom, and his purity have increased a lot. What if a person that reaches the state does not work? Can you imagine? If he has no reason to work. Shri Krishna says that such a person does not do work for himself, but for society. That is why the saints continue working. The saints of Maharashtra say, Ata rahilo upakara purto, meaning they are only working due to their obligation to the world. They do not want anything for themselves. And when they reach an advanced state, then they can say that they are working due to their obligation to God. Saints are fulfilling the obligations to God. Therefore, Shri Krishna is telling Arjun to do Loka Samgraha, the maintenance of the world. Shri Nilkant Acharya describes Loka Samgraha as Loka Samgraho Nama Sudharme Pravatana, meaning making people aware of and active within their righteous duties towards themselves, their families, their societies, the world, the universe, their soul, and God. Every person has his own righteous duties, which I will discuss later, but Loka Samgraha is making a person aware of this wide range of duties. Whilst thinking, Guruji came up with a very beautiful description of Loka Samgraha. Lok means people, and therefore Loka Samgraha is making sure that the humanity and humanness inside a person never dies. Who can do this? A person who has understood true humanity. Therefore Shri Krishna tells Arjun to perform actions with the attitude of Loka Samgraha, and therefore whatever Arjun does will be beneficial to everyone. And the next verse tells us why.